I'm not going to say anything about whether the facts in this film are true or not. Obviously, you don't need me to tell you that if just half of the facts are true, you've got a major problem here. What I want to talk about is how the world should work, whether or not it worked that way in this case. And there are three concerns. One is forfeiture. In forfeiture, the United States government is coming in and taking private property. It is appropriate, it is right for the government to take private property away from criminals if the private property represents the proceeds of the criminal activity. You have someone who engages in criminal activity and buys $1 million house out on Lake Minnetonka, and they own the house, the United States government comes in and takes it. Okay. But if there's an $800,000 mortgage on that house owned by U.S. Bank, what the government's entitled to is a $200,000 difference, the equity owned by the criminal, not to the security interest. So the important thing about forfeiture is that the government use forfeiture appropriately to get at the assets of the criminals and the people who help criminals engage in their criminal activity, not other people, not innocent creditors and other third parties. The power of the government is enormous, and we need, in a democracy, to protect ourselves against abuse of that power. And I'm not saying whether it happened in this case or not. I'm new to these facts. I've looked at this movie. Obviously, I'm very concerned about what I saw here, but it's important that we as citizens focus on whether forfeiture law is being used appropriately or being misused. Second, we need to think very seriously about the bankruptcy system in the United States, and there are many cases where we find the professional fees. And I'm a lawyer. I have nothing against lawyers' fees. But
I do.
You know, we shouldn't get everything. You know, it's happened for many, many years, where you have a bankruptcy, and Lehman Brothers now, we see this back in New York, and a whole bunch of the others where the lawyers' fees are enormous. We have to come up with a system where the assets, what assets there are in a bankruptcy, go to the creditors, not everything to the lawyers. And, you know, one of the ways to try and deal with that is to have clear rules. You have a security interest or you don't. It's not, well, you maybe have a security interest, maybe you don't. We're going to spend a year or two or three arguing about it, and then there's nothing left to fight over anyway. We need to have clear rules here. And if bankruptcy law isn't working in the United States, whether it's this case or any of the other cases I've talked about, we need to fix that. Bankruptcy law is not there for the benefit of the lawyers. It's there for the benefit of the public. And the third concern I have is conflicts of interest. It is critical that when people are put in charge of a receivership, acting on behalf of the United States government, or a trustee in bankruptcy, that that person be free of any conflicts of interest, not have prior relationships with the individuals involved who have perpetrated criminal activity. It is critical that there be independence. And as I say, I have not looked at the underlying facts here, but you saw the movie. The movie has said what it said. But finding out what the facts are in this case and the many other cases around the country is, I think, of critical importance.
Andrew, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, it was a very comprehensive discussion, and I guess what I would add is a couple things. One, it may seem almost incredible what we saw, and I've written about this a couple times in the last week, most recently on the Huffington Post today, and as a journalist, also an attorney, but functioning as a journalist, you're trying to get the facts. Well, what am I missing? Maybe the creditors were really investing somehow. But I guess what I'd say is that the movie is very well documented, to my understanding, after looking at this now for quite intensively for a number of weeks. On the website of Jim, he's got the first 2 chapters of his book. There's a lot of legal materials that are out there. And it's not just that these facts, I think, are documented, but I'd like to say that there are examples around the country of similar situations that are percolating that people don't really realize, because this stuff is complicated, but I've been poking into. And a great example I'll close with is that as I was looking into situations where people were being framed on criminal charges, and in one case I'll mention that I've spent a lot of time in, Alabama, the federal judge was in on it. And I started it as kind of a reporter thinking that there were due process problems. No, the judge was in on it. And then the pivotal thing, and I brought a prop or two here, but I went to a conference where I found authors who have written scholarly books about this kind of problem. And I'll just mention this one now by Paul Craig Roberts, The Tyranny of Good Intentions. It's got an entire chapter on the problem of forfeiture that is present in this case. This book was written in 2000. It was republished this year. And here's the larger point that I'll close on, is that this situation is incredibly dramatic, hurtful here, but there are similar situations around the country, and very important authors have said that this Justice Department is not operating the way we think it should be. I mean, down in Alabama here, they should be having grand juries looking into this. They should be bringing people in and saying, okay, we want to know what was said in these cases. Who said what to whom? And they don't want to do it. And that's a huge problem. And if there was somebody with guts who was, you started in Washington, but you can go back here, and you'd say, why aren't you doing it? And maybe, if I can just take maybe 15 more seconds. For 5 years, I covered the Justice Department full-time as a reporter at the Hartford Courant in Connecticut, another state that had a great reputation for being clean, good government. And one of the things I found covering the courts was that bankruptcy and probate law are particularly vulnerable to this sense that, oh, we'll just pick an expert, everyone knows it's a good person, a friend of the judge. Well, what's going on in those two cases is you have a lot of assets with no clear owner. And I did exposés on judges in Connecticut, and there's no such thing as too honest, too good to be immune to the kind of money we're talking about right here.